So this idea, what lessons did your hardships reveal to you that you may not have learned otherwise?
I think there was, definitely a sense of um, confidence, I'd almost say, that I think in the, acknowledgement of, going through these very hard things that, you kind of start out in life and you have that kind of plan, so to speak, of, how you see your life going. And then they it doesn't. We're definitely in those times really made aware of we're not fully in control
Mhm.
of this thing called life. And but as we kind of navigate those challenges, I found a sense of confidence. And in I think it is in, kind of navigating those difficulties and, figuring out, okay, what's the next step? And, once you get to that thing, okay, now what? There's that constant evolution in figuring out kind of this new normal and what's next. And I often say it's kind of in drawing strength, from those seemingly just insurmountable obstacles that you just initially don't think you'll get through, and then as you get to the other side and you see some strength and confidence and also I think the importance of vulnerability, as we were saying just a minute ago, of letting yourself be vulnerable and asking for that help, which I still find myself needing to remind myself of. You don't have to do everything. There is really great power in asking for help and opening yourself up to that vulnerability and saying, gosh, I really need help with this, and finding such incredible connection that can happen when you do make yourself, more vulnerable and reach out asking for help. And, it's times where you can find commonalities in
Yeah.
challenges. As you and I were talking, I had not known about your mother. I mean, it's not things like, my, experience with suicide or my cancer that we automatically open up to people. I mean, it does take time, but once you do start to talk through some of those really deep, challenging things, I found the incredible connections with other people and in new friendships that I've formed as a result of these challenges. Had I not gone through them, I wouldn't have had some of these same opportunities.
This idea is, finding this community with similar experiences. How did you, how was that for you in terms of like, you obviously, this may have happened before the time of the internet. I don't know if this happened, but were you able to well, how easy was it for you to find that community to support you
It's
in these
it
crises?
was it was definitely not right away. Is when I was figuring out life on my own and being kind of labeled now a widow at 35 years old. I didn't know anyone in my area that was, widowed and not under the age of probably 70.
Mm.
So there were, so many times in trying, whether it was through grief counseling and trying to, find other groups near me, there weren't the younger widows,
Mhm.
and who are maybe like me, raising children and also, navigating, grief and solo parenting. And it was actually, I was working for a marketing agency, and one of my clients was a hospice organization. And I was online doing some research for an article I was writing and, looking up some quotes and some just additional research about just the role of hospice and the benefits that it has far beyond the just, I think our society sees it as just that in the few days maybe prior to death. So I was doing some research and I came across a post. I think I was on the then Twitter and saw something that said Camp Widow. And I was like, what the heck is this Camp Widow? I'm like, I've got to just see what that is. So I click on the link and a web page comes up, and it was if I immediately found found my people. I
Wow.
saw it looked like it was, an event that had been done the year prior, but I saw pictures of women my own age. I saw, younger men. I saw, older men and women, a lot of women there. But when I saw, a group of probably looked like they were, women in their 30s talking in probably a conference type setting, I was drawn in. I completely forgot about the work I was doing. I was like, that can wait. I need to find what this is. And I'm looking at the organization. It's called Soaring Spirits International. And at the time, they had already done a few weekend. They stopped calling it a conference because they felt like that seemed so professional. I'm going to a conference. So they, in its probably maybe third or fourth year, named it Camp Widow. And so it was a weekend. The first events they were having were out in San Diego. The woman who founded the organization was in the very same boat as I was. She was, I believe, also in her 30s, widowed, and couldn't find that community. She knew there had to be other younger widows around. We were past 9/11. There are, everyday accidents and illnesses and things that happen, but she just wasn't finding that sense of community that she knew she needed. And she created it herself, and it is now an incredible organization. They do events all over the globe. And I decided as I was looking at this website, I'm going to go to this event. And so unlike me to think I'm just going to go by myself across the country. Although going to San Diego wasn't too much of you didn't really have to
Oh,
tour
the heart pull,
too
right?
much.
Have to pull, yeah.
But I was not typically one I can find myself to be on the shyer side if I don't know people. But I thought, I have to go. There was just something that was really drawing me in. Like, I need this. And
Yeah.
it was the most incredible event, but also ongoing connection. I mean, to this day, I still keep in touch with women that I met there, across the country, and we're there for all different reasons that brought us there.
Yeah.
I met women who, a woman, her husband had happened to be at the World Trade Center
Oh, wow.
on September 11th and just happened to be there for an event. He didn't work there. But I met people whose spouses died from, illness or suicide or military. I mean, it was like, regardless
The
of
whole
how we
gamut.
got
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
that our experience kind of from that point on was so very similar. And as I mentioned before, the deep connections. I mean,
Right.
we always would joke. We're like, if anyone else at this hotel just happens to walk by and we're like,
Right.
oh, what happened? How did your husband die? They'd be like,
I want to refer to your book, your memoir, Golden Scars. You have this powerful story about learning to trust your instincts. And I think it was a situation when you had to really decide and struggle with the decision whether or not to tell, I think, your son, who is, I think, very young at the time, the circumstances of your husband's death. Um,
yes.
and so, how did you learn to trust in this situation? How did you learn to trust your own judgment?
Yes, so my son had just turned 8 years old, and I was actually at the funeral home.
Mm.
A woman came up. I believe she knew my mother, but she, introduced herself to me, said that she, did grief counseling, and she said that she would wholeheartedly just offer her services to my family and I.
Mhm.
And I immediately was thinking about my son. I thought he's 8. He was somewhat aware that my husband Steve was just acting a little bit differently. He didn't, my son would often say, is Dad feeling okay? I mean, he was definitely aware something was not quite right. And so I immediately had this feeling like, I do want to get my son into grief counseling. This is going to be wonderful. Thank you. And when we were first I was talking with this woman prior to bringing my son in for a session. I just wanted to talk with her a little bit. And she, I mean, very boldly and very strongly with, such conviction said, your son needs to know the whole story. And I immediately, I mean, it was, deep in my gut. I thought, no, not yet.
Mhm.
He had just turned 8.
No.
His father has died. And his father, I can't say that it was from a car accident. Not that that diminishes the death in any way, but a loss from suicide is so complicated. The grief is complicated, and in trying to explain it to an 8-year-old,
Yes.
I wasn't ready to go there yet.
Yeah.
And I just wanted her to understand that I'm not saying that I'm not going to ever tell him,
Mhm.
just not yet.
Mhm.
I need to figure out how I even, am trying to rationalize this and begin to grieve. And so it seemed like we were on that same page.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
brought my son in for the session, and we were in kind of these oversized chairs. And so my son's sitting right next to me, and she had a therapy dog that immediately hopped right into his lap. And so she's sitting across from us, and she's just starting to ask some questions. And at one point, she looks at him and she says, do you know where your dad was when he died? And I could sense my son just stiffening up.
Right. Right.
And I didn't want him to see my reaction, but I was trying to make eye contact with her, and she would not look at me.
Mhm.
And I am like, what are you doing? Because
Yeah.
obviously the answer is going to bring up a lot of questions.
Sure.
And so, I mean, he looked terrified. And so, fortunately, what felt like, 10 minutes was probably only maybe a minute. And she decided to, let's maybe go do some art. And so
Right.
he's gonna
Yeah.
go and do some painting. And I looked at her, I said, what was that about? And she said, I just wanted to know, if he knew
Mm.
where his dad was. And I'm like, that would have gone down a whole other path to
Different.
get to
Yeah.
he
So
took his
you
life.
you you really were trusting your instinct as maybe it's maternal or whatever the case might be, this
Right.
protecting of your child. Emily, thank you so much for being our guest today and sharing your deeply personal, I think, and also powerful story, especially as we are marking Women's History Month, International Women's Day. Your journey truly is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the ability for everyone, not just women, but for everyone to turn their hardest moments into a source of strength and purpose. For those tuning in today's conversation, if it resonated with you, I encourage you to check out Emily's book, Golden Scars. We'll put the image of that and the link to it below in the video. And you can follow her advocacy for women's health on her website on LinkedIn, her LinkedIn page, and also her website, which we're also posting below. And before we go, for our listeners, as we are celebrating International Women's Day and Women's History Month, the Gen Connect U platform and they're continuing their next Women in Leadership Diploma. If this is interest to you, and if you are more intrigued to find about how you as a woman can enhance your leadership skills and become more resilient and successful, I highly encourage you to check it out. The link to that is also below in the video, as well as the discount code WIL25. And also be sure to check out my courses on the Gen Connect U page, the Science of Successful Leadership, also in the link below as well. Lastly, always have the strength and courage to let your light shine forth fully and freely, because the world is a brighter place with you in it. Thank you.